Hey, welcome to the top 10 worst beers of 2015 list, according to me, Chad of Chad's Beer Reviews. Most of the beers that's on this list are actually craft beers that are probably on this list because the bottle or the can I was drinking at the time was either old or it's like a new brewery that just doesn't have down quality control yet. My general rule of thumb is if the bottle or can is clearly old, I won't do a review of it unless it's still really good. Um, if it's clearly expired and it's clearly a bad tasting beer, there's no reason to review it because that's not like really a fair review. But if the brewery doesn't put fresh date on the bottle or the can, how am I supposed to know how old it is? And so I think that's fair game. And I think that's actually true of most of the beers that's on this list. So without further ado, let's get to the top 10 worst beers of 2015 list. Number 10, Heineken Lights. The first word that came to mind when taking my first sip was clean. That's usually not a good sign when that's the predominant adjective to describe a beer, but in this case it's not only apt, but practically a compliment. Obviously this beer is intended to be mild, so it's understandable. The first sip or two has a bit of a sour tang from the light strike, as it was in a green bottle, but it dissipates quickly. Eventually I start to taste a genuine malt sweetness, faint to be sure, but noticeable at least. Hops are practically non-existent as far as bitterness goes, but I get a touch of rye-like spice. The finish and aftertaste are remarkably clean compared to so many foul examples of the style. No metallic or dirty sensation here, but I do get a trace of cooking oil. Number 9, Superbock, my first and only Portuguese beer I've ever reviewed. There's not much to describe about the palate of this brew. It's quite similar to every other adjunct lager. Flavor isn't feather light, but there's definitely not a lot to speak of. Slight corn taste, but not especially sweet. The skunky aroma does not translate to the palate. The corn taste seems to be a bit syrupy, but is in no way cloying. Some spicy hops would be nice. The only attribute this beer really has going for it is the fact it could have been so much worse. This is tolerable, but not enjoyable. Number 8, and probably the most surprising beer on the list, but not the worst beer on the list, Ballast Point Dead Ringer. Ballast Point is quickly becoming one of my favorite breweries. Up until recently, they've seemed incapable of error, but with Dead Ringer, their entry into the Oktoberfest/Marzen style, they finally dropped the ball. When my friends and I reviewed this in a blind taste test in September, it was awful. This particular bottle is much better than the one that was reviewed for the blind taste test, but it's still not that good. It's possible something may have happened to this beer in transit, but whatever the case may be, it's just a disappointing experience. There's definitely a familiar Marzen character here with the presence of a slightly sweet darker malt and just a hint of fruity flavor and maybe some toffee. Unfortunately, it's completely obscured by a sour tanginess to the palate. Much like the nose, is a presence akin to cranberry, tart and a little astringent, no hop character that I can detect. The flavor seems to worsen as it warms. I don't know what the deal is with this beer, but I do not like it. Number 7, another disappointing beer, Narragansett Alley's Double Chocolate Porter. Reading over reviews of this beer on Rate Beer and Untappd, it sounds as though there's either a contaminated batch of it going around, or perhaps this beer just does not age well. The can that I reviewed was about 4 months old at the time, but it seems to have lost all its genuine flavor already. There's a sharp tang right away, a flavor not too far removed from vinegar. I do notice some chocolate-like flavor lurking in the background, but not to the extent that I would consider this a chocolate beer. It has a slight cola taste to it, though it's not necessarily an attribute. Otherwise, there's really no genuine porter character to be found. Either this was very poorly brewed, or the brewer's definition of chocolate differs greatly from mine. Number 6, St. Pauli Girl Lager. I think I have a pretty high tolerance for bad macro beers. I can recall drinking other brews much worse than this one, but I'm still scoring St. Pauli Girl pretty low because it's a lousy beer. The palate is pretty bland and boring, no malt or hop characteristics whatsoever. Initially, there's a tang or spoiled flavor from the light strike, as it's in a green bottle, but I seem to build a tolerance to that quite quickly. Other beers of the general style tend to have a modicum of sweetness, but there's none to be found here. Kind of ironic considering how it touts its ingredients. There are much better examples of mediocre pale lagers, and they're as readily available and cheaper than this, so avoid. Number 5, Linehead Deluxe Pilsner Beer. Knowing what I do about beer, I've reached a point where I'm actually surprised when a beer tastes bad and not from brewing flaws like diacetyl, DMS, or acetaldehyde. A beer like this is deliberately designed to taste this way. Why? It's just mildly sweet, malty, slurry flavor with a noticeable corn water taste. Maybe it is DMS after all. No metallic character, though I notice a tanginess on the finish and a bit of bile-like flavor right as it goes down. To be fair, there is a faint amount of sweetness, but it's not enough to salvage the rest of the palate. Perhaps if it were fresh, and I'll readily admit the bottle that I was reviewing was a bit old, it might make a difference, but for now this is just plain bad. Ick. I should disclaim that it was still within the freshness state. Number 4, River Horse Hopalotamus. I hate getting burned by unknowingly old beer. The only thing I can do to, quote, get back at the brewery for not freshening their bottles, and this is kind of a theme of this entire list, is to review the beer as it is. I'm inclined to believe that River Horse Hopalotamus is a decent beer when it's fresh. This has all the makings of an old IPA. Lack of hops, pronounced malts, taste, tangy astringency, and general off flavors and aromas. There isn't much to say about this beer because there isn't much here. The malt base has held in rather well and creates for peanut brittle and toffee flavor along with lemon lollipops, which is almost always a sign of oxidation. Hops are pretty much gone except for a light piney flavor up front and a touch of earthy resin on the finish. Otherwise, it's mostly a sharp, dry, astringent flavor and a tangy sourness on the finish and aftertaste. I can't imagine this is how this beer was supposed to taste. Number 3, Broken Bow, Broken Auger Lager. I have a feeling when this beer is fresh, it's at least drinkable, maybe even good. I don't know if this brewery has a problem with their actual brewing and or their canning process, or their wholesaler just sits on their product and old cans end up on the shelf of my local bottle shop. Whatever the case may be, the 2 times that I've drank this beer, it's been clearly infected with lacto, and thus makes it impossible to review the palate as it's meant to be tasted. I do detect a little nutty character, maybe even some sweet maltiness that you'd find in an amber or vanilla lager. Unfortunately, the off flavors are too distracting and grow more cloying as the beer warms. I can actually see the sourness working well if this was done intentional via barrel aging, like a Flanders Red or something like that, but there's really no excuse for an ordinary canned lager. Pfft, amateurs. Number 2, Mountain Brew Light. As perplexed as I am by the existence of Stewart's Mountain Brew Ice, I'm even more captivated by the fact that there's a light version. This would seem to imply that the original was so popular that there's enough demand for another product, but without much difference in taste. Mountain Brew Light is a tad better than its forebearer, but it's still pretty lousy beer anyway. While I don't think Mountain Brew Light is vastly superior to its bigger brother, I do notice quite a difference in taste, mostly due to the fact I can actually drink more than a few ounces of this at a time. Not that there's a lot or anything to taste here, though, only a faint cornflakes-like sweetness. No malt or hop character at all. Thankfully, not much metallic or starch or tangy off flavors. There's a bit of a dirty taste, but it's faint and probably due to the fact the can was old at the time. It's actually quite watery tasting. Not terrible, but this would be doubly good if it were just mediocre. Number 1, Twisted Pine Ghostface Killah. This is not a beer. It is an alcoholic gag gift. A beer would imply it's drinkable and has elements of malts and hops. This is essentially just carbonated hot sauce. It really has no redeeming quality since it's extremely difficult to drink more than an ounce of it because it is so ridiculously hot. I'm no stranger to peppers. I've grown my own jalapenos, habaneros, and Trinidad scorpion peppers, and I've eaten them raw. I've even brewed with those peppers and was able to get them to impart gentle warmth. Ghostface Killah is most definitely not gentle, nor is it warm. In fact, hot doesn't really describe it. As soon as it touches the tongue and lips, those body parts are set on fire. It has the taste of raw peppers as it goes down. It's a nasty, earthy, soil kind of taste. After a while, there's a slight smoky aftertaste, not unlike that of a chipotle pepper, but by that point, it's just too late. I can't imagine anyone other than a hardcore pepper enthusiast being able to get through more than 4 ounces of this. There's nothing to taste. It's just liquid fire. So anyways, that does it for the top 10 worst beers of 2015 list. I gotta get out of here because I got a tea time. That's a golf course right behind me. As you can see, this is where I live now in Florida. So, yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys real soon. Bye.